everyone, and welcome back to my sewing room. If you're new, my name's Diane and I like to share with you the story of the quilts that I make. And this week I would like to share this one with you. I've called this one A Picture of Japan. I suppose it would fall into the improv category because I didn't have a design for this. I didn't have a plan for it. It came about because I dropped some quilts over to Project Linus and our coordinator said to me, I've just been donated some fabrics here and there's this lovely Japanese panel. It's got some lovely gold in, it's really pretty. And she said, do you think you could do anything with it? I think the lady that had donated this bundle of fabric, it was due to ill health. She couldn't quilt anymore. So she thought she would give it to Project Linus and some of us would put it into quilts. I didn't take all of the fabric, but I did take this Japanese print. So let me tell you how this quilt came together. So if you have a look at this image, you can see that it's not a very big panel, 30 inches wide by 20 inches deep. And first of all, I thought that I would slice it perhaps into thirds and then across the centre and make small window panes. But when it came to it, I just couldn't bear to slice it up because it looks so beautiful. So then I had the idea that I would just put a frame around the whole of that image, and so I looked for fabrics that coordinated or worked well with the colours that were in that image. And here's some of the salvage of the fabrics that I used. And then I set about making 3-inch half square triangles in the dark brown and the tan to fit the corners of the window or the picture frame. And I decided that the darker brown would be on the bottom and the top, and the lighter tan would be on the left and the right of the image. So it's a very simple construction, putting this frame together. So I was quite happy so far with the way that that frame was looking, and I knew that I was going to have that black with the chrysanthemum flower for the background of the quilt, but I wanted to sort of make that image pop from a distance, and so I decided that I would put a bigger border of white around that. And initially I was just going to put a big square white border on, and then I decided that I might play about with the cornerstones and make them a little bit more interesting. So at this point it measured 44 inches by 34 inches, which wasn't big enough yet for a quilt. I did know that I had that black that would form a border all the way around, but then I decided that if I grew it lengthways it would be more suitable for a quilt, and I thought I would put underneath that picture or window frame a little bookcase. Remember, I was also given a small piece of fabric, Japanese theme fabric, with that larger one, and I thought that if I had a little bookcase I could make some slithers of books of a Japanese theme and put that underneath, and I thought that would look quite nice. And so again, I have no design, I was just sort of measuring by eye, and so I started building a little book stand underneath that picture frame, and I used that paler brown. And so I then decided that I would play about with some angles of the wood just to give it a little bit of depth. And so I made some more half square triangles in that black and the darker brown, and I just fit those in the corners just to make it look as if the bookcase was receding a little bit. I know that the angles aren't completely correct, but it's just a sort of impression, I hoped. And on the left of this image you can just see that smaller piece of Japanese inspired fabric with little pergolas on, and that was the piece I was going to slice up to make some books to go on the bookcase. So I went into my stash and I had a look at anything that could sort of vaguely resemble Asian or Japanese theme florals, colours with bits of gold in, and I took slithers of those to represent books, and the white that I'd framed the image with was going to form the background behind the books. And so all I did was cut a slither for a book in a coloured fabric, and then I cut the same width of the white just to give it enough length to fill up the gap of the bookcase, and I just worked my way along the bookcase doing that. And you can see here on the right of the bookcase that I have fussy cut a piece of that fabric. There's a couple of lovely pergolas in there that I want to try and preserve the image of. So it was a book lying on its side, and so then I had books that were piled up on top, and I constructed it in the same way, just built up the white until it filled the gap. So I built the top part of the bookcase first, and then I put the base along the bottom, and then I decided that I would like to make the base of the bookcase a little bit deeper than the top. So I added another double band onto the bottom of that bookcase, but then I thought it looked too chunky, and so I decided that I would extend the sides to make that look a little bit more decorative. And so I added a little bit of square with a half square triangle on the top to give it depth. So that went onto the bottom of the bookcase. So the bottom bookcase and the top picture frame or window frame were now the same width, and so I could join those together. And I bordered the three sides with some black fabric, and I thought that was beginning to look finished. And I left that image on my design wall for a few days. I kept coming in and having a look at it, and I liked the black frame around the top and the sides. That pale on the brown, because it was the brown bookcase sitting on the floor, it just didn't seem to hang right. I thought from a distance that bottom piece just sort of floated. It didn't quite look finished. And so I didn't want to put a black border around the whole of the bookcase on the bottom, because then the bookcase would just be floating in midair. And so what I thought I would do would be just to add some little square feet on the edge of the bookcase with a black band in between. So the black band would help to ground the whole of the quilt. And so that's what I did next. So I laid that bottom strip on the design wall for a while before I attached it, and I was happy with that. The whole thing seemed a little bit more grounded to my way of thinking. And so I sewed that on, and then I waited a little while until I'd had enough remnants of batting to put together to go inside this quilt. And I had some of this really lovely Kaffe facette monochrome onion rings, it's called, sateen. So I had some pieces of that left over from other projects, so I pieced all of that together, and when the batting was ready, I was ready to go. So I really love designing quilts and piecing quilts and choosing the fabric and putting them all together. Not a huge fan of the quilting process. It has to be done, and so I do it because I want to finish a quilt, but it's just a necessity for me. And so for this one, trying to decide how I would quilt it, because I didn't want anything to detract from that lovely print in the centre. And so what I decided to do was to put the flimsy on my design wall, and then I just measured the centre and I put a chalk line right down the centre of the quilt, and then I chalk lined 3-inch increments on each side until I'd got to the outside. And then I put the sandwich together and I put a row of stitching on those 3-inch lines, top to bottom. And then I decided that I would add another line of stitching to each of those 3-inch increments. And then I decided that I would add another 2. So there's 5 rows of stitching, and there's a little bit of a gap in between, less than 2 inches. And I did that across the whole of the quilt. I used a very silvery grey, pale grey cotton thread, which I thought worked well with all of the colours. So the quilting adds a little bit of texture to the image, but it disappears into the colours on that Japanese print, and also it doesn't overwhelm the white or the books on the bookcases below. And I use the same silver grey thread in the bobbins, and that disappears in this monochrome onion print. And so that's the story of this week's quilt. If you saw last week's, you'll see that I encountered a couple of problems, but everything's sorted now. My new machine is working wonderfully. It's all quilted. This has been washed, it's labelled, and I'm going to drop it off to Project Linus tomorrow with the other 2 quilts that I've already made. So, if you're still with me, thank you very much for your company. I hope that you enjoy your sewing and you've enjoyed this sort of improv quilt, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.